I want you to close your eyes for a second.
Hmm.
Imagine a sculptor in ancient Greece. He's standing in his workshop, and the air is just thick with marble dust. He is chipping away at this massive, cold block of stone. He's obsessed. I mean, he's not just trying to make a statue. He is trying to carve the perfect woman. He works day and night, smoothing out the marble to create the eyes, the lips, the curve of the neck. And when he's finally finished, the statue is so beautiful, so lifelike, that he actually falls in love with it. He's heartbroken because, well, she's cold stone. So he prays to Aphrodite, the goddess of love. She hears him, and she grants his wish. The cold stone softens into warm flesh. The statue breathes. She comes to life.
The myth of Pygmalion. It is one of the most enduring stories in Western culture.
It is. And it's not just a love story, is it? When you really look at it, it's humanity's oldest dream.
The dream of creating life from non-life.
Exactly. Of building something with our own hands that can think and move and exist on its own. For thousands of years, that was, the realm of magic or gods or miracles. But today, we don't use prayers or magic spells. We use mathematics. We use algorithms.
And that transition from myth to math is exactly what we are exploring today. We are doing a deep dive into a really substantial, heavy-hitting text, modeling complex processes through nature-analogous methods. This is a 4th edition published in 2025 by Christina Kluver, Jürgen Kluver, and Jörn Schmidt.
And nature-analogous methods is a bit of a mouthful, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
It sounds like something you'd see on a syllabus and immediately drop the class.
It does sound dense, but the concept is actually incredibly grounding and, frankly, beautiful. The central argument these authors are making is that if we want to solve the most complex problems in the world, and we're talking about everything from stock market crashes to biological evolution to how a rumor spreads on Twitter, we have to stop trying to force-feed computers rigid, human-made logic. Instead, we need to start teaching computers to mimic the way nature solves problems.
So we're talking about looking at how a brain actually learns, or how a lizard grows at scales, or how a flock of birds moves, and then using those biological blueprints to write code.
Exactly. It's about reverse engineering biology to build better technology. It's admitting that, nature has had a few billion years of R&D time, and maybe we should copy its homework.
I love that. Before we get into the lizard scales, which, by the way, is a mind-blowing part of this research we will absolutely get to later, we need to sort out our definitions.
Yeah.
I feel like in the news today, specifically with the boom in generative AI, people throw around terms like AI, machine learning, and algorithms pretty loosely. They're used almost interchangeably, like synonyms.
They are, and it causes a significant amount of confusion. The authors of this text made a very sharp academic distinction that I think is crucial for us to understand right out of the gate. If we don't get this right, the rest of the book won't make sense. They separate the field into 2 main camps: artificial intelligence, or AI, and artificial life, or AL.
Okay, let's unpack that. Most people assume AI covers everything from a chess computer to a Roomba. What is the difference in this specific context?
So when these authors talk about AI, they are strictly talking about systems that are heuristically oriented toward human thought processes. Basically, it's an attempt to model intelligence as we understand it cognitively.
Top-down thinking.
It's top-down thinking. It's trying to replicate the mind, or at least the results of a mind.
So AI is, how do I build a machine that plays chess like a human? Or how do I build a chatbot that writes a poem like a human?
It's mimicking the output of a brain.
Right. It's focused on the cognitive act. Whereas artificial life, or AL, is oriented towards biological life processes. It's not necessarily about thinking in the philosophical sense. It's about reproducing, swarming, evolving. It's about modeling the mechanics of life itself, often at a much simpler level than a human brain.
So AI is the brain, and AL is the ant colony. That's a fantastic way to put it. AI is the individual thinker. AL is the collective system, or the biological mechanism.
Yeah.
And here is where it gets really interesting, especially regarding the current hype around machine learning. The source material draws a parallel to psychology that I found absolutely fascinating. They compare classical AI to cognitivism.
Cognitivism, that's the John Pius school of thought.
Yes. In cognitivism, you have a model of how the mind works internally. Stages of development, internal schemas. You try to understand the black box of the mind. Classical AI tries to build that structure. But they compare modern machine learning, the stuff powering ChatGPT, Google, and your Netflix recommendations, to behaviorism.
Behaviorism. That's the old school of psychology that says, I don't care what's happening inside your head. I only care about the external behavior.
Just stimulus and response.
Stimulus and response.
Exactly. I ring a bell, the dog salivates. I don't care why the dog salivates. I don't care if the dog is thinking about a bone or just reacting reflexively. I just want to predict that if I ring the bell, the drool happens. Machine learning focuses purely on performance and efficiency. It often ignores the how or the why in favor of the result. It doesn't have a model of intelligence. It just has a massive model of statistical probability that gets the right answer.
That is a really critical distinction. It's
Yeah.
like the difference between understanding how an internal combustion engine works versus just knowing that if you press the pedal on the right, the car goes fast.
Precisely. You can be a very good driver without knowing anything about mechanics. Machine learning is a very good driver. But in this deep dive, we are looking at something deeper than just pressing the pedal. We are looking at the mission to understand complexity itself, from social groups to biological evolution, by building models from the bottom up. We aren't just looking for the right answer, we're looking for the process. We want to open the hood.
And bottom up is the key word here. This is the first big shift we need to understand to get what this book is about. The authors argue that for a long time, science and physics in particular has been obsessed with top-down modeling. What does that actually look like in practice?
Well, this is the traditional approach in physics and ecology. Let's take the classic example used in the book, the Lotka-Volterra equations.
Okay.
These are famous differential equations used to track predator-prey populations. Let's say foxes and geese.
I think I remember this from biology class. You have a curve for the foxes and a curve for the geese. When the geese population goes up, the foxes have more food, so the fox population goes up.
Right.
But then the foxes eat too many geese, the geese population crashes, and then the foxes starve, and their population crashes. It's a cycle.
That's the one. It creates a beautiful sine wave. And in the top-down world, you represent this with a massive, complex mathematical equation. You plug in the density of foxes and the density of geese. You run the math, and it spits out that curve. It treats the population as a single variable.
So what's the problem with that? I mean, if it works and it predicts the population, why do we need to change it?
It works to describe the result, but it fails to capture the reality. The equation treats the foxes and geese as a fluid, as a density. It ignores the individual. It assumes a statistical average. It doesn't account for the fact that this specific fox is limping, or that specific goose is particularly good at hiding, or that maybe one fox just isn't hungry right now. It looks at the global picture, but ignores the local reality.
It's like trying to understand a traffic jam by looking at fluid dynamics equations, treating cars like water in a pipe.
Yeah.
Sure, you can predict the flow rate, but that equation can't tell you that the whole jam started because one specific guy named Dave dropped his coffee and swerved, cutting off another guy, which caused a chain reaction.
That is a perfect analogy. The traditional method describes the jam. It can tell you how long it will last, but it doesn't explain how it started or the mechanics of interaction. This is where the nature analogous approach, the bottom-up approach, flips the script.
Okay.
The authors introduce a program called FUXJANS.
Which I assume stands for foxes and geese.
German efficiency in naming, yes. FUXJANS is a simulation. But instead of one big equation controlling everything from the sky, they simulate individual agents on a grid.
Like a checkerboard.
Exactly, a world for these digital foxes and geese, and they give them very simple local rules.
Okay, so instead of programming the population curve, you program the fox.
Yeah.
You give the fox a tiny brain. What kind of rules are we talking about?
Really basic stuff. Rules like, if I'm a fox and I see a goose in the square next to me, I eat it. Or, if I am starving and I find no food within a certain number of turns, I die.
Simple survival logic.
Right. Or, if I am a male fox and I meet a female fox and there is empty space nearby, we reproduce.
So no one is telling the system, okay, create a sine wave of population growth. No one is programming the global result. They're just programming the local interactions of eating, dying, and mating.
And here is the aha moment. When you run the simulation with hundreds of these little independent agents following their simple rules, what happens?
The sine waves just appear.
The global order emerges. You get the exact same population sine waves, the oscillations that the complex differential equations predicted. But they weren't programmed in. They emerged from the chaos of local interactions.
Emergence. That is such a powerful concept. It means the order isn't imposed from the top. It grows from the bottom. It feels more, more honest somehow.
It is more honest to reality. And this matters profoundly, especially when we leave the world of foxes and start looking at humans. In social sciences or cognitive sciences, we often don't know the global equation.
Right.
We can't write a differential equation for how a society collapses or how a rumor spreads. The variables are just too messy. But we do know the local rules.
Right. We know that if a student is bullied, a local interaction, it affects their learning. That learning impact affects their future social standing, which seeds back into the system. A top-down equation misses that nuance because it treats all students as an average.
Exactly.
A bottom-up model captures it because it's simulating the actual life process.
Exactly. It allows us to model systems where the individual matters. And reality, especially human reality, is composed of individuals, not averages.
So if we accept that the world is built bottom-up, we have these agents interacting, and things are emerging. But how do we visualize where these systems are going? Because if it's all just local interactions, it sounds like it could just turn into total random noise. What keeps it from just being a mess?
That is the fear, right? That without a boss or an equation in charge, everything falls apart. But the source material gets into this really cool concept of system dynamics and the geometry of chaos.
The geometry of chaos.
It turns out chaos has a shape.
Chaos has a shape. I like that. How do they explain that?
We need to talk about attractors. The authors use this beautiful visual of mountain streams. Imagine 3 different streams starting high up in the mountains. They are miles apart. They flow down different paths, over rocks, through valleys. But eventually, gravity pulls them all into the same lake at the bottom of the valley.
So the lake is the attractor.
Correct. The lake is the stable state the system wants to settle into. It doesn't matter where the water started, the initial conditions, it ends up in the same place. The mountain slopes, where the rain falls, that's called the basin of attraction. It represents all the different starting points that eventually lead to that same result.
So in a computer model or even a social system, you might start with chaos, but eventually things settle down. If the system stops changing completely, that's a point attractor, like a pendulum finally stopping at the bottom.
Exactly. A dead planet is a point attractor. Everything has stopped moving. The system has reached equilibrium. But systems don't always stop. Sometimes they get stuck in a loop.
Ah.
That's a cyclic attractor. Imagine a traffic light. Red, green, yellow, red, green, yellow. It never settles on one state, but it repeats a predictable sequence forever.
It's caught in a groove, it's dynamic, but it's not going anywhere new, it's just pacing back and forth.
Right. Now, this leads us to how we measure complexity. Because if we are building artificial life, we don't want a dead planet, the point attractor, and we don't want a traffic light, the cyclic attractor. We want something interesting. The book brings up Stephen Wolfram, who is a giant in this field. He categorized all these systems into 4 classes. And I love this because it's like a personality test for the universe.
It really is. I was looking at this section, and it feels like a way to categorize everything from biology to business. So let's look at the Wolfram classes. Class 1 is the most boring.
Class 1 is the point attractor. You turn the system on, and very quickly, everything dies out or turns into a homogeneous blob. Think of pouring milk into coffee and waiting until it's just a flat beige color.
Nothing happens.
Nothing happens, no information is preserved, it's total stability, but zero life.
Class 2 is the traffic light. Periodic. It blinks on and off. It's predictable. Still pretty boring if you're looking for life or intelligence.
Yeah, if you see a Class 2 system, you know exactly what it's going to do in a million years. It's just going to keep blinking.
Then you jump to Class 3. This is chaos.
Pure chaos.
In Class 3, small changes in the start lead to wild, unpredictable messes. The system never settles, but it also never repeats. It just churns. Think of static on a television screen. It's active, but it's just noise.
And this is where they talk about the strange attractor, right?
Yes, that's it.
A strange attractor fits in here. The system is chaotic, but it's confined. It's like a moth flying around a light bulb. It moves erratically. You can't predict exactly where it will be next, but you know it's going to stay near the bulb.
It has a shape, but no pattern.
Right. It's active, but it creates nothing.
So Class 1 and 2 are too rigid. They're frozen. Class 3 is too chaotic. It's too messy to build anything. That leaves Class 4.
Class 4 is the sweet spot. They call it the edge of chaos. In Class 4 systems, you see local structures forming. They move, they interact, they persist for a while. Then maybe they change. They aren't frozen, but they aren't random noise either.
This is where you get complex things like gliders or patterns that look like they're communicating with each other.
Exactly. This is where computation happens. This is where life happens. Your brain, a healthy economy, a thriving ecosystem, these are all Class 4 systems. They're stable enough to exist, but flexible enough to adapt.
That makes sense.
If you are too stable, you can't learn. If you are too chaotic, you can't remember. You have to be right on the edge.
It's that balance between order and surprise. And the best way to see this in action, and this is a huge part of the source material, is through cellular automata. We touched on this with the foxes, but we need to explain what a cellular automaton actually is, because it's the engine for all of this.
Cellular automata, or CAs, these were invented by John von Neumann back in the 1950s.
Wow, that early.
Yeah, he was a brilliant mathematician trying to imagine a machine that could reproduce itself. The concept is deceptively simple. Imagine a grid, like a massive checkerboard. Each square on the board is a cell.
And each cell can be in a certain state. Let's keep it simple. Black or white, alive or dead, on or off.
Right. And time moves in steps, or ticks. At each tick, every cell looks at its neighbors and decides what to do next based on a set of rules.
Just its neighbor.
Just its neighbors. It doesn't look at the boss or the government or the user. It simply looks at its neighbors.
And the neighbors part is key. The text mentions two main ways to define a neighborhood.
Yes. You have the von Neumann neighborhood, which is looking at the 4 cells directly touching your sides, north, south, east, west.
The 4 cardinal directions.
Right. And then you have the Moore neighborhood, which looks at all 8 cells surrounding you, including the diagonals.
It's like the difference between only talking to the people sitting directly next to you at a dinner table versus talking to everyone at the table.
Exactly. And once you have your neighborhood, you apply the rule. The most famous example of this, which sits squarely in that class 4 sweet spot, is Conway's Game of Life.
I remember playing with this on computers in school. You click a few squares to make them alive, hit go, and watch what happens. It looks like little digital bacteria growing.
It's a perfect example of emergence. The rules are incredibly simple. It's all about population density. If a live cell has too few neighbors, fewer than 2, it dies of loneliness.
Okay.
If it has too many more than 3, it dies of overcrowding. But if it has just the right amount, 2 or 3, it stays alive. And critically, if a dead cell has exactly 3 neighbors, it comes to life. Reproduction.
That's it. Those are the only rules.
That's it. They're totalistic rules. It doesn't matter where the neighbors are, just how many there are. And yet, from those 3 little rules, you get these gliders that move across the screen. You get guns that fire patterns. You get things that look like biology.
It's incredible.
You get a system that is theoretically capable of computing anything a modern computer can compute. It's a universal Turing machine.
Built on a checkerboard.
Built on a checkerboard. It shows that complexity doesn't require complex rules. It just requires simple rules applied many, many times.
But here is where it gets really interesting. Because up until now, we're talking about computer screens. We're talking about simulations. But the source material brings up a real-world example that absolutely blew my mind. The ocellated lizard.
This is my favorite part of the book.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful example of biology acting like a computer. So this lizard, found in places like Spain, has this stunning skin pattern, green and black scales. For a long time, biologists just thought, oh, it's genetics. It's just a pattern like a zebra stripe.
Right. You get the DNA for stripes, you get stripes.
But researchers at the University of Geneva looked closer. They tracked the lizards as they grew up.
Yeah.
They realized the scales weren't just staying the same color, they were flipping. A green scale would turn black, or a black scale would turn green.
No way.
And they weren't doing it randomly, they were following a rule.
Wait, so the lizard's skin is alive? I mean, obviously it's alive, but the pattern itself is moving and changing.
The pattern is computing. They found that as a lizard grows, a green scale wants to be surrounded by 4 black scales and 2 green ones. A black scale prefers 3 of each. The skin is literally a cellular automaton. The scales are the cells, and they are looking at their neighbors and changing their color to fit the optimal pattern.
That is just, it redefines what we think of as computing. The lizard is a living computer. It's running a cellular automaton algorithm on its back to generate camouflage.
It is, but there is a catch. And this brings us back to that difference between AI and AL. A computer model of the game of life is deterministic.
Okay.
You have rule A, you always get result B 100% of the time. But nature is messy.
Nature is what the authors call stochastic.
Right. Stochastic means probabilistic. In the computer, if the rule says turn green, the cell turns green immediately. In the lizard or in human society, the rule might say turn green, but maybe there's only an 80% chance it actually happens.
Why?
Maybe the chemical signal didn't get through. Maybe the protein wasn't there. Maybe the lizard was cold that day.
There's noise, there's fluctuation.
And the authors argue that this noise is actually crucial. In a purely deterministic system, you can get stuck in a bad loop. A cyclic attractor you can't escape. You're just going round and round. But in a stochastic system, the noise, that random chance that the rule doesn't fire, can kick the system out of the loop.
It's like writer's block. If
Oh.
you keep thinking the exact same logical thoughts, you stay stuck.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need a distraction, a random noise, a walk in the park, to jolt your brain into a new pattern.
Exactly. The noise allows the system to explore new states, to find better solutions. It allows the lizard to find a better camouflage pattern or species to find a new niche. Perfection, or 100% predictability, is actually a weakness. You need a little bit of chaos to survive.
That's a life lesson right there.
Yeah.
Embrace the noise. Okay, so we've got grids, we've got lizards.
Yeah.
But the world isn't always a perfect grid where everyone has exactly 8 neighbors.
Not at all.
Sometimes I talk to you, but you don't listen to me.
Mhm.
Or I have 100 friends, and you have 2. The grid is too rigid for some things.
This brings us to Boolean networks. This is the next level of complexity. Cellular automata are geometrically rigid. Everyone has the same number of neighbors. Boolean networks allow for asymmetry.
That's like a social network or a gene network. Gene X might turn on gene Y, but gene Y doesn't necessarily care about gene X.
Right, the connections can go anywhere. It's a web, not a grid.
Hmm.
And the connections follow logic gates' Boolean functions, AA, OR, XOR.
Walk us through that. How does a gene or a person use a logic gate?
Think of it as decision-making. Imagine a gene. It says, I will only activate if protein A is present and the protein B is present. That's an A and D gate.
Okay.
Or I will activate if I see signal A, OR, signal B. That's the fundamental architecture of both our digital computers and our biological regulation.
And when you map this out, you see these massive, tangled webs of connections, thousands of genes turning each other on and off, or millions of people influencing each other. It looks like it should be total chaos.
But it isn't. And this is another key insight from the text. Even in massive, chaotic networks, you get these islands of stability. They call them local attractors.
I love the analogy they use here. They compare it to society.
Yes, a society might be in a state of global instability, let's say a revolution or a massive market crash. The global attractor is chaotic. Everything is changing. But within that chaos, you have specific institutions, a church, a local club, a family unit that remains stable and unchanging.
They're local point attractors.
They're local point attractors floating in a sea of chaos.
So the system can be stable and chaotic at the same time, just in different places. The text mentions the brain does this too.
Constantly. Your brain is a massive Boolean network of neurons. It oscillates between uncertainty, maybe wondering, is that a friend or a stranger walking towards me, which is a chaotic or cyclic state. Your brain is processing, churning through possibilities.
Right.
But then you recognize the face. Oh, that's Fritz.
And click. You lock in.
That recognition is a stable point attractor. Your brain settles on a conclusion. So we are constantly shifting between chaos processing and stability recognition. If we were always stable, we couldn't learn new things. If we were always chaotic, we couldn't function. We live on the edge, constantly dipping into chaos to find new stable points.
So we have the grid, the cellular automata for spatial things like skin patterns. We have the network, the Boolean network, for logical things like genes or brains. Now we need to talk about how these systems change over time. Because a lizard isn't just a static pattern, it evolves. The authors break this down into 3 levels of dynamics, and I found this to be a really helpful framework for understanding everything from board games to evolution.
It is. It frames the learning process beautifully. Let's start with level 1, state dynamics.
This is the simplest one. Think of a game of chess. The pieces move. The board state changes every turn. You move your pawn, the state changes. But the rules of chess never change.
Exactly. The system operates within a fixed framework. You can have millions of different games, but a bishop will never suddenly learn to move like a knight. A computer running a standard program is usually at level 1. It processes data, but the code doesn't rewrite itself. It's static flexibility.
But living things aren't like chess pieces. If a student is failing a math class, they don't just keep making the same moves until they lose. They change the way they study. They realize the old rules aren't working.
That is level 2, adaptive dynamics. Here, the system has meta rules. These are rules about changing the rules.
Meta rules. I like that. It's like a rule that says, if the current rules aren't working, switch to plan B.
Precisely. So in the student's case, the feedback, the bad grade, triggers a meta rule. Change study strategy. In evolution, this is survival of the fittest. The species changes its reproduction rate or its physical traits based on the environment. The rules of the organism, its DNA instructions, are effectively rewritten over generations to ensure survival.
So level 1 is playing the game. Level 2 is changing the rules to win the game. What is level 3?
Level 3 is self-organization. This is the deepest level. In level 2, you have an external goal. Get a better grade, survive the winter. You are adapting to something. In level 3, there is no external goal. The system organizes itself just to make sense of the data.
The example given is a baby learning to see.
Right. This is profound. No one sits a baby down and explains the physics of light or the concept of perspective. No one programs the baby with a vision software. The baby's brain is bombarded with raw data photons hitting the retina. Chaos.
It's noise and color, a blooming, buzzing confusion.
And yet the brain self-organizes that chaos into meaningful patterns. Edges, colors, faces. It builds the rules of vision from scratch, purely through internal logic. It creates order because order is more efficient than chaos. It is learning to learn.
That's the definition of nature analogous. We aren't programming the computer to see. We are building a computer brain that learns to see. We're trying to get computers to level 3.
And that is the ultimate goal of this entire field, to move from level 1, which is static code, to level 3, self-organizing intelligence, to build machines that don't just process data, but understand it.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've gone from Pygmalion statue to digital foxes, from lizard skin to the logic of revolution. What is the big takeaway? Why does this book matter right now?
For me, it's the universal modeling scheme the authors propose. They are saying that we can model anything, literally anything, from a lizard scales to the stock market, by breaking it down into these 4 components we discuss.
The 4 component.
The elements, which are the agents, the local interaction rules, which is what they do, the topologies, who they talk to, and the meta rules, how they adapt.
It's a toolkit for reality. It's a way to strip away the noise and see the machinery underneath.
It is, and it represents a massive scientific shift. For centuries, we relied on top-down equations. They describe the world beautifully, but they don't explain it. They tell you how the planet moves, but not why the traffic jam started. Bottom-up simulations explain by recreating. They let us grow the phenomenon in a petri dish of code.
It allows the soft sciences, sociology, psychology, to finally be as rigorous as physics. We don't have to guess how a rumor spreads. We can build a model and watch it spread. We can move from observing the statue to building the statue, cell by cell.
And hopefully we understand it better than Pygmalion did, because once you build it, you have to live with it.
Now, before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a thought from the very end of the source material. It's a bit of a mind bender, and it fits perfectly with our theme of loops and patterns.
The theorem of eternal recurrence.
Poincaré's theorem. The text mentions that any finite deterministic system, if you leave it alone long enough, must eventually repeat its state. It has to.
Because there are only a finite number of arrangements of atoms or bits. Imagine a deck of cards. If you shuffle it enough times, eventually you will repeat the exact same order. The universe, in this view, is just a very, very large deck of cards.
So if the universe is a finite system, and if it operates on deterministic rules,
then we are just living in a very, very long, complex loop, destined to repeat this exact conversation in this exact deep dive eons from now.
And here we are building Industry 5.0 and things like ChatGPT. We're building tools to process more and more information, to model the world with higher fidelity. The question is, are we building these tools to understand the complexity of this loop we're in, or are we just adding more noise, more chaos, accelerating us toward that next strange attractor?
That is the question. Are we the masters of the complexity, or just another cell in the automaton?
Something to mull over. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the code of nature. We'll see you in the next iteration.